Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei, and we're going to do another watercolor journal page today together. I'm so excited to paint with y'all. We are going to, excuse me, we are going to paint some fabulous tulips today. So some loose and free tulips. I'm going to put a background into this particular one. But tulips are great because they're a very basic shape. We're going to do the tulip flower part, stems with these big long leaves. We'll put a few other details in there for some leaf and foliage and a nice bokeh background. And bokeh, when I say bokeh, I just mean out of focus, fuzzy kind of background. So we're going to start with the tulips and the stems, and then we're going to put in the background, and then we'll put some details on top of that. I am using my Princeton Velvet Touch size 10 brush. Probably use that for most of this, and I'll let you know if I switch. Core Paint, QOR by Golden. Whatever brand you have that has similar colors will work probably just as fine. And then I'm in my Bao Hong sketchbook. I know a lot of you have said that the cold press, so I use a cold press book, that they are out of stock. They often go out of stock of the cold press. It's because it's such a great paper. So I'm sorry. Hopefully it comes back in stock again soon. I have a reserve book for myself, so I'm almost done with this one, but I have a whole other book waiting in the wings, and I'll start to track and kind of hopefully find that they come back in stock shortly before I run out of a second book. So I always usually try to buy two or have one as backup. All right, so I'm pulling out some cadmium red medium for my tulips. And maybe I'll also do like another color tulip. Maybe we'll do some yellow as well. So this is a diarrhea yellow, a very warm yellow, like an orangey yellow. Very similar to gamboge. And I'm also going to be using sap green, of course. And then the other two colors I won't be using purely as these colors. I'm going to mix them in. Would be, oh, I'm almost out of this cadmium yellow. Whoops. So I'm going to use cadmium yellow for some of my background area to make some lighter areas, and phthalo blue mixed in with my green to make some darker green areas. So just putting them out there for you. So those are the colors that we're going to use. And you know what? Let's swatch them out really quick. So again, it was cadmium red, diarrhea yellow, sap green. These are our three main colors. Very warm color palette. And then I'm going to mix in some cadmium yellow to the sap green and some phthalo blue to get some varying colors, varying versions of green. Okay, so that's our color palette. And we are going to not draw anything out for this one, but if you want to draw your tulips out, you can. I'm just going to make the shape of them with the paint and my brush. I'm going to water this down a little bit because I'm going to do this in a couple layers. All right, so my tulips are going to be here in kind of a cluster. Let's do one here. I'm going to leave some white. Spaces. Okay, so it's kind of like an egg shape. And look at that color move. Okay, there's one. I'm gonna fill this in a little bit there. Okay, one. Let's do another red one. So tulips, again, have this really simple shape. So I'm just kind of going from the top to the bottom. They're kind of closed up, like little egg shape. They're a little flatter on the bottom where they meet the stem. Leaving some white space. And do I want to do them all red or maybe throw in some yellow? Do a yellow. Let's water this down a little bit. It'll be a little tricky because they're getting close together and I don't want them to bleed into each other necessarily. Okay. You can always go back and refine the shape later and add more petals. And these are all still really wet, okay? I'm going to do one further back here, kind of going into the background. I'm going to keep this one a little lighter. Let me put a little darker color towards the bottom. Okay, so we have a nice little cluster, maybe one more. This might be overkill. I'm just having so much fun painting these. Make this one a little bit smaller. Look at that core paint move. That is really a quality of core paint, that it moves really, really fast, wet on wet, and dramatically. So if that's too much for you, core might not be the brand for you. But if you love it, it's really hard to achieve as much movement with some of the other brands. So that might be a difference that you see if you're painting with a different brand. You might have to help it move a little bit more. All right, so let's get into our sap green. And these are still really wet, so I'm just going to touch the base of them, but let some of this paint kind of mix together and bring down these big sturdy stems. From the center. Don't worry, we're going to add lots more background on here. All right, so now what we're going to have to do is let everything dry and we're going to get into the background, okay? So let it all dry and we'll come back here momentarily. I'm going to make a cup of tea and come back. All right, y'all. Okay, we're back and everything is nice and dry. I'm sticking with my size 10 Velvet Touch brush. And what I'm going to do now, you'll notice I did tape off the edges of my journal because I want to make a nice clean edge. Sorry, just fixing that. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to do wet on wet. And I am going to wet. I'm not going to worry about the stems too much. Like I can wet over top of them because I can always redo the stems later on if I need to. But I am going to work around the flowers, the petals part. But go right over the stems with my wet on wet. They'll bleed a little bit. It's okay. It's all going to be a big out of focus, vibrant, dancing, jubilacious mess anyway. Sometimes it's just really necessary and fun to paint in a very kinesthetic way. Lots of movement of your brush, of the paint, being very physically involved versus very concentrated, detailed movements. All right, I just want to make sure everything is pretty much wet. Looks like it is. Okay. Now again, the great thing about core is it works really well with wet on wet. All right, so I'm going to make a really light green here with this yellow. And I'm going to start dropping that in some areas. Again, not worrying too much about the stems. but going around the flowers themselves. All right, so now I'm going to use some regular sap green, a little darker. Trying not to overthink it. I'm mixing in some phthalo blue. We'll go right kind of around. You can leave some white space in a few areas. I don't want everything to be perfectly ringed with white space, but I like the idea of a few areas, like having a little white gap between. Maybe going to throw in some straight phthalo blue. Kind of mix it on the page. There we go. That feels good. Let me get a little more sap green. Some really dark bits kind of in here. All right, that feels good. Although this section right here is bugging me, so I'm just going to blend this out. I have a clean brush. And I'm just moving the paint that's already down there. That feels just a little bit more integrated. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry again, and then we're going to do another layer with leaves and some details. We'll re-put in the stems in a darker layer so they pop more to the front, and then we will be done. All right. All right, here we are back with our gorgeous little freeform tulips, and we are going to add some more details to bring the stems and some leaves for these into the foreground. So I'm just taking sap green, and I am going to be mixing a little Payne's gray in with some of this stuff. So this is a super dark sap green. I know it looks really dark like this. It will dry. It'll be a little bit lighter. We're going to put these in, just kind of going over what I already went over already. And now I'm going to mix a little blue in here, a little more green. Actually, I'm going to take this yellow green. I'm going to do this first. I'm going to put in these big kind of long swoops. It's really hard to see with the yellow. Don't worry about it. These big long swooping leaves that like taper off at the top like this. Okay, and I put the light yellow color in because I want some of that to come out after I put this darker color on. So now you can see. We're not going to cover up all of the lightness. So it has a little light, a little... Well, I don't love what I just did, but let me see if I can fix it. Pull out some color. I want it to feel like it's kind of up and behind this whole setup here. There we go. Okay. And now, while that is drying, I'm going to get a smaller brush Let's see what I got over here. I'm going to pick up my size 4. I have a size 4 Princeton Select brush. And I'm going to use some of these darker green, blue-green colors with some Payne's Gray here. And I'm going to put in some thinner like lines and grasses and leaves. Just to bring some interest and texture that didn't kind of exist before. So everything was very wide, you know, the bulbs were wide, the leaves are wide, the background is soft and has lots of big wide splotches of color, where these are tinier, darker, more refined shapes that will help to just bring some visual interest. I'm just playing. I don't really know. I'm not making anything specific. Just keeping the idea of leaves and texture in mind. This corner over here is a little bit darker and it's still a little wet, but I definitely want to add some stuff over here. Maybe some little specks in here. You could come in with some bleed proof white if you wanted to and add some little highlights and specks of white flowers in the background or something like that. I don't think I'm going to do that today. I'm going to keep it pure watercolor. So play with shape and texture and design of different things you've seen out there. You don't have to recreate everything perfectly from nature. You can make stuff up. People forget that part about art. You can have it be influenced by something you have observed in the real world, in nature. You can have it inspired by, but it doesn't always have to be an exact recreation. All right, I could keep going. I have some indigo here. I just happen to have it here. You don't have to add this, but I'm gonna add just a few little bits of this because it's a nice dark color. I'm gonna put right over top. This wasn't completely dry up here, so some of it is bleeding out, and I'm okay with that because again, this is a nice loose piece. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna let this dry, take off the tape, and see what we got. So let's take off our edges. You can let yours dry first if you want, and of course warm up your tape a little bit if you have a delicate sketchbook or paper that you're working with, and a real hardy tape. Just warm up that adhesive a little bit. Look at that beautiful edge there. It just helps frame and set a foundation for such a loose and wild, colorful piece. So those are our tulips for today. I hope they brought you a little inspiration, a little light into your life and beauty today. Thank you so much for painting with me. I'm Shayna Cersei. Don't forget to check out the description for supplies and materials that I use regularly. Find me on Instagram, and I will see you for our next watercolor journal page. Thanks for painting with me. Take care, y'all.